Good morning everyone, this is Vishwanath, and today in this class I'm going to teach you how to play with Nimzo Indian defense with black pieces. Okay, so Nimzo Indian is a very good encounter with black playing d4, uh, knight f6. So in almost of all the major openings in Nimzo Indian, the main idea is to control the e4 square, c4, e6, knight c3. Now planning to play e4, bishop b4, pinning that knight. So if he plays e4, I can just grab this e4 pawn. So here we have many major lines. So let us start with queen c2. Okay, so queen c2 immediately eyes the e4 square, which also supports the knight on c3. So he might threaten something like e4. So here we have the major lines doing castling, allowing e4, but I don't seriously recommend for those who are playing for the Nimzo Indian for the first time. So just prevent this e4 square. d5, so it's a very nice option to stop this. And for example, c into d5, e into d5, knight f3, castles, bishop g5, knight bd7, e3, c5. So here black is now getting an isolated pawn on the d5, but having so good development advantage, and the king is already pretty safe. c5 is a very nice move to play. So if he captures d into c5, knight into c5, a3, bishop into c3. So in Nimzo Indian you don't often see bishop coming back. In many of the major lines, bishop takes the knight on c3, queen into c3, and knight c e4, bishop into f6, knight into f6, leaving white a slight advantage position, but black can easily hold this one. Okay, so let us come back. So after queen c2, d5, if he plays a3, so the most important move here to attack the bishop. So most of us try to move this bishop back and try to save the double bishop advantage, but if you play bishop back, that will be a big mistake. In Nimzo Indian you don't preserve the bishop on b4, bishop into knight. For example, queen into castling, knight f3, and here the most important move, d into c4, and queen into c4. Here we find how to attack this queen and to develop your pieces. So the best move is b6, taking control of the light squares, and now he immediately threatens to play bishop a6 to attack the queen. So here we have two major options, one bishop g5, and some might try something like bishop f4, so that if I have bishop to a6. Queen can capture the c7 without losing a very valuable tempo. So let us try with bishop g5 and bishop a6, attacking the queen. Queen going back to the a4 square, and here you can see many number of games played with many top grandmasters after queen c2 and queen a4, but I seriously recommend queen a4, just making sure this knight is now little block, like I can't move this knight because the a6 bishop is under attack. c5, trying to break the center, d into c5 and b into c5. Now rook a d1, attacking the queen. Queen b6, just supporting the bishop, and now you can simply move the knight back. So if it tries to capture bishop into g into f6, and I feel like this position is quite okay for black. After queen g4, king h1, and you can't move this pawn, so there is no real big flexible moves for white here. So if I play something like e3 and bishop into f1, king into f1 and queen into b2, position is pretty much equal for black. So so if I queen into c4 and b6, let us see with bishop f4. So this is one more important variation we need to consider. So after bishop f4, black still ignores this pawn and try to gain the development by taking a tempo. Bishop a6 and queen c7, and here black has a very nice move, queen d5. So leaving some squares for the queen. Now rook c8 immediately attacks the queen, and you can clearly say white is clearly under problem because he still didn't develop all pieces. Now queen d5, let us say queen d6, trying to get over the queen, and now the queen moves to e4 square. So white really don't need to exchange anything here. So rook c1, trying to get the open file. I'll just play knight b d7, and once he moves the pawn to e3, here I can directly take the bishop, but white is still having more better move than that. Is rook a c8, just challenging the rook on c1, which is so problem here. So if I capture this rook into c8, queen b1 is a checkmate. Queen b1 is a check, king d2, and knight e4 is a mate. So after knight b d7, white is having a pawn. White is having a pawn, and black is having a good pieces development and some attack on the king structure. Okay, so let us move back to the original position. So here queen c2 d5. So let us go to the another variation. Okay, so let us try with e3. So e3 is a very modest opening, so you can see this e3 playing in many top players. So castle, don't waste the moves, don't waste the tempo, do castling. Black plays immediate, white plays immediately bishop d3. Now again the same idea to control the e4 square, so I can just push the pawn to e4. So d5 immediately prevents the e4. White also now tries to move the pieces to do castling. Black immediately strikes the center, c5. If we do castling, and here we have some very nice interesting options. So, and one of the options is to take the pawn, take the pawn on any of these two pawns, or playing knight c6 and b6. So these four are the main important options you need to consider in this position. So let us start developing with a piece. So uh, let us say knight c6 and a3. So every option in Nimzo Indian, black should seriously study on how to continue the position. There are some very interesting variations where black will have positional advantage. Even computers might assess that is wrong. Okay, so after a3, you know the theory of Nimzo Indian. Never move this bishop back. Now try to save. Only in few variations we will save, and that I will explain this in the future class. Okay, so bishop into c3, b into c3. Now b6, just developing bishop to b7. So knight e5 or c into d5. Let us say c into d5 and e into d5. Knight e5 and bishop b7. This position is pretty much equal. There is nothing there for even for white or black. Okay, so let us go back and we'll see one more variation. So after c5 castle, so there is one interesting move is to take the pawn on c4, d into c4, trying to gain a tempo, bishop into c4. Now b6, or no, sorry, now knight bd7. So after a3, just take that knight, bishop into c3, b into c3. Now play b6. Idea is to play bishop b7, still controls the e4 square. If we place bishop d3, bishop b7 and rook e1, knight blocks the e4 square. So with the idea of playing f5, knight, other knight can go to the f6 or queen e7, just finish off the developing moves like rook fe8 or rook a d8. And I feel like black is doing well. Even though white have double bishop advantage, black is still okay. Okay, now okay, so let us c5. Uh, so here we saw white is doing castling in this variation. So what if I take c into d5? C into d5 is very much equal after e into d5, d into c5. Now we have simple things like knight bd7 to c5 and yeah, knight bd7 to c5, bishop sorry, for example castle, and knight c5. This is far more, there is nothing there for white here. I can say white is just having one, black is having some isolated pawn, but still this pawn cannot be attacked so easily even if I capture bishop into knight on c3. There is nothing to move this knight on f6, so this pawn is well defended. I can simply move the pieces outside and I can start operating the open files with my rooks. So this is hardly any advantage for anyone. There is no advantage for anyone. So castling and okay, so here we saw knight c6 and d into c4. Now we consider one more option, that is c into d4. So after c into d4, e into d4, d into c4, bishop into c4. As many of you know, this is playing against an isolated pawn structure, and white having a good piece play with all the bishops, knights. White is having only one weakness on the d4, and I feel like this position is very good to play with white. So after castling, um, so you can directly play b6 without knight c6. So b6, c into d5, sorry, c into d5, e into d5, knight e5, bishop to b7. So this is the idea of knight c6. And yes, so here he cannot trap the bishop on b4. Something like this will not work, because after you play knight e2, I immediately play c4, then I have a bishop that can come back. So let us say bishop d2, knight b d7, f4, knight into e5, knight into e5, or knight e4. Both are important. Knight e4 is much important. Knight into e4, d into e4, bishop c4, knight into e5, and f into e5, bishop into d2, queen into d2, and bishop d5, with not more than equal chances for both the players. So Nimzo Indian, if you see almost all the variations, it's pretty hard to challenge with white. Almost everything black can easily hold on. And if you play any mistakes like opening trap, there are many opening traps with blacks. So if you play any weak move with the opening, for example, say like queen c2, queen c2. No, for example, say like bishop g5. Now immediately white black gets a very good counter attack. I can start playing by moving the pawn to c5. So d5 is not at all possible, because of I'll just throw this one h6, or even bishop into knight is also good here. Bishop into c3 is also nice. B into c3, or just e into d5 is also okay. E into d5, c into d5, and d6. So this is equal. Okay, so for c5, if we play something like e3, black can directly play queen a5 and keep this pressure on this knight. Bishop into f6 loses at least a pawn for the white, and that can simply take the, and this is clearly better for black. So there are many opening stages where white may fall in this Nimzo Indian. So after knight c3, bishop b4, let us see some other variation. So we saw queen c2 and e3. Now I will show you some other variations like knight f3 comes to symmetrical to the old positions what we have learned with queen c2 sometimes, and we'll see something different with f3. Okay, f3 directly strikes e4. So the point of playing f3 is to play e4, and you know the rule, never give the e4 square for the opponent, so play d5. Now this is not possible, so just play e3. I want to move the bishop outside to do castling. Do castling and bishop d3. Now this pawn on f3 looks little problem, like my key square knight on f3 is not possible. So after getting into some problem with the pieces, so black is now can seize the initiative. We'll just break the center by playing c5, thinking that knight cannot come to the f3 square. So if you take c into d5, or let us say these three, if he takes d into, I can simply play knight c6. I don't have any problem with this. And c into d5, e into d5, and knight g e2, rook e8, and now you can find that e3 became a big target for black. So castling, you can say bishop into c5. In this variation, now you don't need to capture bishop into c3 and let this knight come to the c3. I'll just grab this c5 and keep more pressure on this e3. So let us say king h1. Okay, so I can take this e3 now itself, or I can play something like a6 to prevent knight b5 to d4. One of the knights will fix on this d4 square. So both are equally good. Mm. Okay, let us say bishop into e3. Why we have to leave a free pawn? Bishop into e3, bishop into e3, and rook into e3. And I feel like yeah, black is doing very well. Black is in fact better than white position here. So okay, let us go back. So f3 is very easy to play with the black pieces. So if not f3, there is some players might try to confuse and play something like g3, and yeah, g3 can be met by so many options like d5, castle. So let us start with castling. Bishop g2. I can play d5. So knight f3, d into c4, and castle, knight c6. So this might convert into something like Catalan structures, but it's hard to say that clear advantage it is white from. There are slow things that you need to improve. So here you don't need to capture bishop into knight. So bishop into knight you can take, and yeah, and slowly white will start to keep pressure on this pawn, but I don't need to develop. So take this one, bishop e7, and whatever. So something like say bishop g5, h6, bishop into knight, bishop into knight, e3, and something like e5 will definitely give equal chances for black. Okay, so so g3. What else? So nc3, bishop b4. So we'll finally see the move with knight f3. So knight f3, directly you can play d5, c5, or even do castling. All of it comes to the line. But let us start moving the pawn to d5, because this is a line with where we can see almost all the top players are playing this move. So bishop g5, knight bd7, you take this cd5, cd5, e3, and yeah, castle, followed by threatening c5, bishop d3, and c5. Okay, so as I told you, this move will come to the same opening what we have seen in the previous one. So let us say castling and bishop into c3, b into c3, and now c4. Very interesting to push the pawn to c4, where first instinct look like white is clearly better, but after analyzing, white's advantage is slowly getting nullified. So you'll have things like bishop c2, rook e8, a4 preventing any further pawn pushes like a4 and b5. So queen a5. Start pressuring on this one now. Okay, so defending this with queen d2, knight e4 will come. So rook a3 is a sensible move, and then knight e4. And you can see I can still apply more pressure on this one. Okay, so let us go back and yeah. So I was getting keep on updated by the players who don't like to play Nimzo Indian defense. So for them, I'll simply suggest them to start playing with c4. So c4 opening just tricks the Nimzo Indian players. So c4, I don't really play like knight c3 u6, and I had a question now where to put this bishop on f8. So for example, knight f6. If he knows completely Nimzo Indian, then I don't play now piece d4 where he can met by e6 and bishop e4. I'll just play something like g3 or knight f3. And e6, okay, I'll simply play knight c3. Now this is into queen's, sorry, English opening. And now bishop e4, this is completely different. Now this pin is not a big problem. So the moves like yeah, g3, anything, bishop g2. Here giving up double bishops, I have some other things to do and take control of the center by playing d4, which is somewhat very different positions. If you don't want to allow this bishop, even this knight c3, bishop b4 also, just play g3c. Then it will be much difficult for the Nimzo Indian players to keep the bishop on e7. Then you play knight c3. So this is somehow some ways you can trick your opponent. Even this you can do with playing knight f3 in the first move. For all the d4 players who don't want to encourage Nimzo Indian defense, they can start playing with knight f3. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm going to update more in Nimzo Indian in the next video. If you like this video, please don't forget to subscribe and leave comments. If you have any other opening to analyze or any of your games to analyze, feel free to post that games. I'll definitely come back to you. Thank you very much, and thank you for watching this video. Bye.